ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Step Up to the Mic. Welcome back to the show, and we're going to go down to Arlington, Texas, and welcome in sports agent Billy Martin Jr. Billy, thanks for joining us. How's everything going? Hopefully you're staying safe down there.
You know, just doing my best to avoid the virus.
Yeah. It's crazy, right, Bill?
You know, in today's world, it's hard to know what you're reading is true, what you're hearing is true. And with this crazy thing, I've never experienced anything like it. 9/11's as close as it comes for me.
I guess one question, with you being a sports agent, you know, the name of the company is Pro Agents. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that and make a prediction. You know, when are we going to see baseball? I'll be optimistic and say we will see baseball in 2020. When?
I'm going to say early July. They're going to do it without fans, I'm going to assume. But I think it's going to be in the home ballparks.
As an agent, is it rewarding for you to be a sports agent, Bill?
Some days, you know, it's a fluid business. You have great years, you have bad years. It's for me a business about relationships, and you know, I think we've been blessed to have some awesome clients, and I consider myself lucky to still hear from former clients who haven't played in over decades, and I still hear from those guys, and I love being part of the game. I'm a baseball lifer, so you know, it's a unique role. Sometimes you got to play bad guy, but I just try to be real consistent and shoot people straight.
Well, just as you said, you're a lifer. I mean, you were born into the game. When you look at your dad, Billy Martin, and when you think about probably when you were born, you're living out, not out of a suitcase to a degree, but when you look at, he was the manager of the Minnesota Twins in '69, and then the Detroit Tigers in '71, and then the Texas Rangers '73 before, thank God, he came over to the Yankees.
Well, and before that, he was the AAA manager for the Denver Bears, which was the Twins' AAA affiliate. And a year and a half before that, he was in Minnesota as their third base coach. I mean, yeah, it was every 2 or 3 years we were packing and moving. And, you know, baseball is the life of a vagabond. I mean, you do have to live out of a suitcase to some degree. And we did love Texas. We dropped anchor here. You know, if you remember, my father started wearing cowboy hats and boots from then on, and he really embraced the Texas persona. Opened a Western wear store in New York City, if you remember, and but his heart was always with the Yankees.
You know what? Let's center around that moment in time. Your dad opened up the Western store. There was no bigger celebrity in New York than your dad. And let's center in on 1977, a year near and dear to my heart, every Yankee fan's heart, and yourself also. Just to paint the picture for some of our Yankee fans, diehard fans that are a little too young to remember those days, you know, let me just take them back in time. You know, when I was a kid growing up in the 60s, my timing wasn't great. I was a big Mickey Mantle fan, but I caught the end of his career. Sure. My first memory of the Yankees was watching Mickey Mantle hit home run number 500.
Oh, wow.
1967, Mother's Day, on a little black and white TV. And it was Mickey, you know, he'd be limping around the bases and everything with his head down. The game was completely different back then. And 68 was his last year, and the team, you know, really took a downturn. It almost, the dynasty was over. And it was a type of thing, Bill, where the Yankees kind of were deteriorating right in front of our eyes. Your dad was long gone as a player. And basically what happened was, to be honest, the Mets took over the town. They won in '69, and the Yankees, with the Horace Clarke years, they just they just kept on, sinking in the standings, etc. The stadium was falling apart, and we just didn't know what was going to change things around. When Steinbrenner bought it in '73, there was hope, and we started going in the right direction. When he picked up your dad in '75, boy, that was a big piece, and we started building towards something. I really felt it. I was a teenager, and I said, wow, you know what? You could feel this with Thurman Munson and with just the team that they put together. You mentioned in '76, we got close. We got really close. We made it all the way to the World Series. Hey, there you go. Chambliss, you know what? Let's start there. Tell us about your memories of that year. We all remember Chris Chambliss hitting a home run, putting them into the World Series. Just give us some thoughts of '76.
Well, as a kid, for me, it was just so awesome to see Dad get to the World Series. I mean, he'd been to the playoffs with every other team he managed other than Texas, and they were close in '74. They were very close behind Oakland, who won the World Series that year. But, New York's where he always wanted to be. And to win there, what it meant to him, it's hard to imagine. I mean, the team was great. That was a special year for me because it was a year I really realized how lucky I was to be his son, to get to hang out with the guys, to travel with the team. I was actually in Fenway that season. In left field, I had Thurman's glove on, taking balls in batting practice in left field, and one of the balls hit the green monster, and that thunk that's so iconic, it made me think, wow, Babe Ruth used to play on this field, and the DiMaggio brothers and Ted Williams, and the history of it all kind of hit me, and just how lucky I was that year. And then for Dad to, get to go to his first series, I'll never forget it.
I'll never forget it either. I was at those World Series games. We got swept, and in '70s, that was the coldest I ever was. I've been to football games where I wasn't that cold. I mean, we sat there, and you know what? As a testament to your father and the love affair that the diehard Yankee fans had with your dad and that team, not a boo in the stadium. We got swept pretty good. We got kind of embarrassed. But you know what? We walked out of that stadium and we said, next year is our year. And I'll tell you from my perspective, and then you can go from there. When we got Reggie, I was a little bit concerned right from jump because he made some comments about Thurman Munson, and I cringed. And I'll tell you what.
Stirs the drink.
Yeah.
There's a new straw stirs the drink, right?
Bill, I swear to you, I saw this just before it even happened. I said, the thing that we love about your dad and the thing that we loved about that team, they were as tough as nails. Nettles, Piniella, Munson, your dad. And you know what? They were fighters and they were scrappers, but the enemy was never within. The enemy was Brett in the other dugout. The enemy was whoever we were playing. And it's just the turmoil in '77 that as we went through that season, it took a lot away from it for me. And, I don't know what your perspective was.
Well, okay, so while all that was going on, and, my father doesn't get credit for being the psychologist he really was. And he realized right away that he would have to do something, or this fraction and Reggie's, taking a shot at Thurman and all that stuff was going to harm the team. So what did he do? He found ways to aggravate Reggie and kind of put him in his place for the other guys on the team to feel like, hey, thanks, Skip. Thanks for standing up for us. And so he batted Reggie in the 6 hole. My father knew Reggie should have been in the 3 or 4 hole, but he did it on purpose to say, hey, talk about my captain. You're not going to be a good team player. This is what we're going to do. And it's not what he wanted to do. He wanted to be Reggie's friend. He wanted to get along with him. But it's what he had to do to save the team, because otherwise it could have gone the other way. And what Reggie doesn't know, and looking back at that situation, my father got the best out of him, and that was his job. It wasn't to be his friend. It wasn't to be his pal. It was to win baseball games and to get one of these rings.
That's right. That's right. And you know what? Just to paint the picture a little bit further, when you think about it, just as I was mentioning, the Yankees went into a steep decline in the late 60s, early 70s, before your dad got there. And now we're knocking on the door in 76. We get Reggie in 77. There's some turmoil, but there's a lot of talent on that team. And again, knocking on the door is the way I'll describe it. But you got to kick that door down and you got to finish it, right?
Yes.
And when George Steinbrenner is the owner of that team, and you're playing in New York, the stakes are as high as they get, and the pressure is as ratcheted up as it gets. And to everybody's credit, and I'll just tell you, because just being in that stadium for Game 6 of that World Series when Reggie hit the 3 home runs, that's a memory, Bill, I will never forget.
No way.
I couldn't afford, I was 19 years old. I couldn't afford to pay full price, but the scalpers were asking for all kinds of money. So, I waited till the national anthem was being played. I bought the tickets and ran into the stadium, and I'm sitting in one place early on in the game when Reggie hit the first one, and the second one by the end of the game, people are passing around, flasks, drinking whiskey, passing them around to each other, throwing them onto the field. It was like the Wild West. We just couldn't wait for that celebration. And when it culminated, boy, oh boy, I mean, talk about a party, talk about a celebration. Tell us from your vantage point.
Well, like I said, I sat in the dugout for quite a while to watch the Billy Club show. And that was outstanding until one of the clubhouse guys grabbed me and said, "Get in the clubhouse. It's dangerous down here." That was my first night to drink champagne. I was underage, so I'm not going to admit that to any police officers. But Willie Randolph's little brother and I had a lot of fun, and in the clubhouse with the guys, and getting to know those guys, and they were all very good to me. See their joy, to feel it, to know that all that hard work and effort and dealing with the pressure of New York and the media and Dad and George and Reggie and all that stuff that was going on, to be there and see that, it still gives me goosebumps.
Sure. Me too. Just listening to you, and I was. It's just funny you mentioned Billy Clubs. I was one of the unfortunate ones. I ran onto the field a little prematurely. I don't know, and I got clubbed back into the stands and everything like that. Once the last out finally was recorded, I ran onto the field, and I'm just, I wanted to get first base, second base, or home plate. So we ran over towards home plate, and you can't pry up home plate with your hands because it's kind of nailed down. And a typical Yankee fan takes he takes a crowbar out of his jacket. And I said to my friend, I said, how come we didn't take a crowbar? He pried up home plate, the pitching rubber. I said, I got to get something. So I ripped up a section of sod, Yankee Stadium grass, and I rolled it up. I put it in my snow parker, went home that night. I walked into my house. My mother said, "What's that?" I said, "Ma, Yankee Stadium grass," and I'm planting it in the backyard. And memory of a lifetime. Billy, Bronx is burning. I remember seeing that depiction of it. What was it accurate? Your mom was in it. Your dad. With his interaction.
And in so many ways. I mean, look, there were some little things that were off. I watched it twice. I got to watch it at the premiere, and which was at Old Timers Day. That was really neat. Got to meet John Turturro, who played my father. When I went home, I watched it with my mother, and it was so funny watching some of it with her because she remembered all that stuff like it was yesterday. And the lady who plays my mother in the show says to my father when he says, "Billy Joe, do you want to go to the game with me?" right before game 6, the final game. The lady playing my mother says, "Shh, Billy, don't bother him. He's watching cartoons." My mother goes nuts. She's like, "Are you kidding me? The whole world thinks I don't want my son to go to game 6 with his father of the World Series because of Heckle and Jekyll." You know, she was ready to strangle the producer, but I'm pretty sure it really had more to do with the fact that they just didn't want to hire another child actor, because I did go to game 6 with my father and probably saw you get hit by that billy club.
That was me.
it was otherwise very accurate in a lot of ways. I thought Turturro did a great job of capturing my father's mannerisms, and now the ears were a little silly. They had the cab doors wide open that they put on him, but I thought that was great.
Turturro's a great actor, but your dad's better looking than him, and but he captured your dad real good. It was, I thought it was pretty good all the way around. Let me ask you this now. You go to school the next day? I mean, like, you're a 13-year-old kid. Tell us, walk us through being on top of the world there.
Well, I think I experienced my first hangover the next day because of the champagne. But, I to be honest with you, I don't remember the next day. I only remember that moment because, it was
so special. Now, but what about soon after that? Your dad was on top of the world. He's making, Miller Lite commercials. He was a celebrity, above and beyond a ball player. We're kind of a little bit ahead of his time. Nowadays, the young generation is, they all do commercials. Guess what? Not all of them did commercials. Name It did commercials. Your dad did commercials. George was a natural. Steinbrenner, Mr. Steinbrenner. But not everybody did commercials.
No, they didn't. And he did lots of different ones, but those Miller Lite, especially the group ones, were his absolute favorite. I always teased him that he would have paid them to do those commercials because they were so much fun. The guys were drinking the whole time. Yeah. They were doing those commercials, and it was a lot of fun. He made lasting friendships on those commercials with so many guys that he might not have, hung out with otherwise. And he's had so many stories about that stuff. And yeah, he was on sitcoms and movies and
Saturday Night Live.
Sure. He was the only manager to ever host Saturday Night Live. He was on the cover of SI 7 times. He was on the cover of Time magazine. He was recently mentioned in Ocean's 13 and American Gangster, and it was surreal. Walking the streets of New York with him was so much fun. Guys would be cleaning a window on the 3rd story of a building and scream down, "Give him hell, Billy!" as we're walking down the street, because you could recognize him because he had his little cowboy hat on and his iconic walk, and cabbies would roll down their windows and say the same thing. It was special because,
we loved him. We loved him because he was the embodiment of New York, and he connected people, guys like me. He connected. I mean, I'm not old enough to go back to the glory days of Mickey Mantle. He was a teammate of Mickey Mantle. So yeah, when you look at it, he won in 51, 52, 53. Then he goes into the military, 54 and 55. Maybe they would have won in 55 if he was there, right? I mean, the Brooklyn Dodgers. Well, I guess we got to give him one, right?
He got back for 55.
Oh, at the end? Okay.
Yeah, but when they won, he didn't take a ring that year. He
Wow.
didn't want a second place ring because he
Okay.
already had rings from 50,
Right.
51, 52, 53, where he was MVP. I mean,
Right.
his first 4 years in the big leagues, he got a World Series ring, a
Yeah.
championship ring. So 55, he didn't want a second place ring. And in 56, he got another one.
Yeah.
And, it's funny. People ask me all the time, why New York? Why did he love New York? I'm like, let's look at his first 4 years. That's why.
Right.
Because my father loved to win. That's all he cared about was winning.
Right.
All that mattered to him. I don't know if Yankee fans know that he took less pay at times to go back to the Yankees. Other teams, Cleveland offered him a lot of money plus a draw of the gate because everywhere he went, attendance went way up.
Yeah.
Well, he turned that down to go back and be a Yankee because that's where his heart was as a baseball man. And his relationship with George, to me, is still one of the more amazing relationships ever. I hope George ends up in the Hall of Fame with my father one day. They both belong there. I think George was absolutely a Hall of Fame owner. And it's, their relationship was as true a love-hate relationship as I've ever seen. But there was always a giant chunk of respect there.
There's a lot of similarities between the two. I mean, they were both fiery. They were both, they win at all costs. They would cut off their arm, rather than lose a ball game. And you have two alpha males, and it's understandable. Bill, I want to just do like some quick hits with you, and if you have anything to share. So let me just as you alluded to, boy oh boy, Casey Stengel loved him, the manager of the Yankees at that point. They were winning 49, 50, 51, 52, 53. So those were the halcyon days, the golden era of not only for the Yankees, but New York baseball, because the Dodgers and the Giants were great teams. You had the rivalry, and you had, Mickey, and you had the Duke, right, and you had Willie Mays. But tell us about 52, because your father was just coming into his own, or on the, approaching coming into his own, and he makes that famous catch in 52 on that wind-blown pop-up by Jackie Robinson, saved the World Series for the Yankees. Did he ever talk about that to you?
He a little bit. He wasn't big on boasting on his past. Mickey Mantle told me more about my father as a player after Dad passed.
Right.
The Mantles live in Dallas, and I spoke to Danny Mantle actually on my way to the house to do your show. He would tell me about those things, and but the only time he mentioned it, we talked about it because, that was a ball really between the pitcher's mound and home plate. And so it obviously should have been a ball that Yogi or Moose,
right,
got at first base,
right,
caught. But Dad said he looked up, started going to the ball like you do. And then he looked around and he realized nobody else was really going for it. It was kind of such a tweener ball that everybody assumed the other guy was going to get it. And so Dad, cranked it in low gear and ran up and made that catch. And, he, in his mind, it wasn't that hard of a catch, but he was just glad that he was heads up enough to keep going after it and not take for granted somebody else was going to catch it.
You were talking about Mickey. 56, my goodness, win the World Series. But Don Larson, a lot of attention people think about 56, but when you think about Mickey and the Triple Crown year, did your dad share any memories of that?
Well, of course, Dad was his roommate that year.
Wow.
And Dad was the good luck charm roommate. He was the guy you wanted because you won MVP basically, or Cy Young if you roomed with Dad for some reason. So, hearing Dad talk about Mickey, Now, and mind you, it was his best friend, and really more of a brother than he ever had in real life. Um, but obviously, he was a great talent evaluator, and the way he talked about Mickey was surreal. I mean, the the power he had, his ability to run. You know, so many people don't realize Mickey could have stolen so many bases. He might have been the fastest player ever to first base, especially in that era. And he would, you think about these guys that won't even hit against a shift in today's world. Mickey would lay down a bunt if he was 0 for 7, 8, or 9 because he just wanted to change his mojo and get something positive going. And here a guy with more power than anyone in the game, more just raw power that could just hit it out of damn near any ballpark, would lay down a bunt to get on base to help his team win ball games.
Like you said, he hit the light tower at the old Yankee Stadium. Upper deck ball would have went out. It would have been the only fair ball to go out of Yankee Stadium if it didn't hit the light tower. Just as you said, a great drag bunter. Just anything to win, get himself out of a slump. Just as you alluded to, speed. Who has a combination of speed and raw power like that?
Think about how neat it must have been back in those days. Dad, Mickey, and Whitey, the three amigos, would go out to Toots Shores and hang out with the Rat Pack, with Gleason and Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr. And those guys were asking, what's Ted Williams like? All these baseball stories, right? And Dad and Mickey were like, well, what's it like dating Angie Dickinson? And, asking the celebrity stories, but they all bonded, and it was a regular thing. Years later, 76, I get to meet Frank Sinatra. I saw him sitting in one of the Yankee games and went to get his autograph on my Yankee hat. And he asked me how I'd been able to get in that section. And I said, well, my father's with the Yankees. And he looked at me and says, wait a minute, are you Billy's son? And I said, yes, sir. And he's, you sit down next to me. And so I sat in the aisle. He was in the aisle seat. I sat in the aisle 3 rows behind the dugout. Okay, somebody's about to tell me to leave, right? And sure enough, one of the guys comes and asks me to leave, and Frank looks at him and says, he's with me. Oh, yes, sir, Mr. Sinatra. If Frank says you're with him, you're okay. But he had me sit with him and talk for a couple innings. And what a great man. He told me some of the stories and how much fun they used to have back then. It was such a different world, People beat up on Mickey and Dad and any of those guys because, they drank too much. You think about the 50s. Go watch a movie from the 50s. Yeah. The celebrity has a glass of Jack Daniels in one hand and a cigarette in the other.
Right.
And that was posh. That was cool back then. And
it was a way of life. It was just as you said. Sinatra had a song. It was called "One for the Road." I mean, yeah, right. I mean, you think about it, right? I mean, it was a different lifestyle back then.
He was buried. He was buried with a bottle of Jack Daniels, Frank Sinatra, because he said it's the nectar of the gods, baby.
You know what? You're Italian. Your dad was Italian. When you look, at Alfred Manuel Martin, no Billy in there. Got the name Billy from your great grandmother. His grandmother said "Bella, Bella," and that means beautiful in Italian.
Yes, means cutie, sweetie, beautiful in Italian. And the neighbor kids heard that and turned that into Billy.
Yeah.
And his father left his mother, I want to say when he was about 6 months old. Yeah. So he also didn't want to honor his father and be the second. So he wore Billy like it was his name. And that and his mother was kind of tough on him. She'd look at him, especially as he started getting older, and say, "Oh, you look like the jackass that broke my heart and left me." And that hurt. So Dad wanted to be Billy, and twice he went to change his name and backed out because he felt like it was a sin. It was not against the church. It was against the Catholic Church to change your name, he felt like. And so he never did it. But that's why when I was born, he made sure I was Billy, Billy. And he was going to call me Billy Jr. And that was just how it was going to be.
Yeah. And, we talked about DiMaggio, right? I mean, does he have a relationship with Joe D? I mean, they weren't contemporaries in a sense on the ball field, but tell us about their relationship.
Oh no, Joe was really good to Dad. Because when he signed, Joe was at the very tail end of his career, and was a big brother to Dad. Because they were both from the Bay Area, both had played in the Pacific Coast League, and so when Dad got there, and they were both Italian, Joe would take Dad out to dinner and buy him a steak and kind of took him under his wing a little bit. Mickey told me the best stories about that because Mickey was shy. People don't realize that. The Mantle boys and I talk a lot, and they talk about, people say, if Mickey didn't drink so much, he would have been so much better. I'm not sure of that because I think that liquid courage helped him a little bit in that crazy New York society. But Mickey said he had a hard time even talking to Joe as a rookie because he was married to Marilyn Monroe. He was the biggest celebrity in the game. But Dad, on the other hand, would joke around with him and play practical jokes on him. And Jody loved that Dad treated him just like one of the guys. So Mickey even told me about some of those practical jokes. And because Mickey said he was such a celebrity, I could tell you step by step what he would do when he would walk into the clubhouse. He would walk in and we'd just stare at him the whole way to his locker. And if he knew your name, he'd look at you and go, "Hey, Mick." If he didn't, he'd just go, "Hey." And, "Hey, Billy." "Hey, Whitey," to the next guy. And then he'd get to his locker and literally Mickey could tell me how he undressed. The shoes first, then the jacket, then the pants, then the vest. But Dad would play tricks on him. And if you remember when, you wouldn't remember, we don't remember, but Marilyn Monroe, after they divorced, she did a Playboy Playmate
spread. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Dad got the poster.
Oh, God.
And taped it to the inside of the clubhouse door. All right. So Jody gets to his thing. He's doing his thing, walking to his locker. He starts undressing. And he's used to most of the guys staring at him all the time, but not everybody in the room looking at him. So he glances around. He sees it, walks over, grabs the poster, crumples it up, throws it in the trash can, looks at my father, just shakes his head because he knew exactly who did it. And, Mickey's like, "Your dad was playing practical jokes on him. I couldn't even talk to him. I would just get tongue-tied because it was Joe DiMaggio." And it must have really been what a neat time to be a Yankee. But Joe and Dad were very close, and even later in Dad's managerial career, Joe would just come hang out in the clubhouse with Dad, and literally sit there for a couple hours, just chit-chatting about the family. Sometimes even with that just uncomfortable silence or comfortable silence because they were so close and friendly that they just sit there, and while Dad's making up the lineup, and Jody would sit on the couch and next to me. It was neat.
Well, that's a great testament to your dad, that your dad had great people skills. First of all, no one could have I don't think anyone else in that clubhouse, I didn't know that story, but I don't think anybody in that clubhouse could have got away with putting up that picture and not getting a head chop other than he knew it was your dad and everything like that.
Well, it was a neat bond they had, and
He-
what what a great player, and what a great guy. And he,
yeah. You know,
I mean, we'll never see some of the things he did again, right?
no, never, absolutely never. 56 game hitting streak, etc. Everything. I mean, the man, right? He hit as many home runs as he struck out. I mean, it's ridiculous by today's standards. It drives me nuts that you know that they don't put any premium on putting the bat on the ball. Always strikeouts don't matter. Supposedly, when you get into the postseason, they do matter. Got to be able to put the bat on the ball. Bill, let me ask you, because just as you're talking, I'm talking, I'm saying, your dad was Italian, DiMaggio, we had Rizzuto, you got Berra and everything like that. Was your dad proud of his Italian heritage? Did he ever go back to Italy, talk about his, roots?
Yes, he was ridiculously proud of his Italian heritage. And didn't go to Italy a lot. I know he went. He and my mother went. And he was, but as a baseball man, you don't get to travel a lot, especially when you're in management. And as a player, he was never a big money guy. He played in the era. Try to wrap your head around this.
Yeah.
He got $10,000 a year playing for the New York Yankees. So if they won the World Series, he got another check for $6,700. Almost 70% of his total income. That check meant he could sustain himself in New York until spring training rolled around. If not, he was going back to California to work in the penicillin plant or sell cars or both so that he could keep his head above water until spring training started. And, try to wrap your head around that compared to what today's player makes. And one of the things it created, back then, Hall of Fame manager Casey Stengel, he didn't have to yell at you if you didn't run out a ground ball or if you dogged it on a play in right field. 5 of your teammates were waiting for you at the dugout.
Right.
Well, hey, dude, you're jacking with our World Series money.
Right.
That changes the game when the players are holding you accountable as opposed to the coach that you're used to barking at you all the time.
I remember doing something on my show, just did a little back of the envelope math, and I'm saying to my audience, A-Rod, I figured when he had signed after he opted out and then he signed the contract with the Yankees, he was making $156,000 a game. And I said, that's more than Mickey Mantle made in a year, in his best year. It's just absolutely staggering. But, you're speaking of money. I mean, the dollars were big enough, but your dad was handsomely paid. He was the highest paid manager, in his day, correct?
Yes, he was. He was absolutely. And
he put fans in the seats, Billy. That's part of the reason why. I mean, he was a great manager. People, I'm very Yankee centric, but when you think about what he did for the Bay Area after, he bounced around and went back to, was it an 80 or whatever it was with Billy Ball? I mean, right? He was bigger than the team.
Well, okay. There's a new book that's just now come out about Billy Ball. And it's called The Resurrection of the Oakland A's, Billy Ball. It's written by a guy named Dale Tafoya. And the year before my father managed in Oakland, that team only drew 300,000 people for the whole season. Okay. And Finley hired my father so that he could sell that team. And because of what happened, because Dad resurrected that team, because it was Billy Ball, and that's what the billboard said back then. They just said Billy Ball, catch it. And when do you ever see that with a manager where he's the top billed celebrity, the star of the team? And obviously it was his hometown and a kind of renaissance there, but as much as he loved it and he was the Pope while he was there, he still wanted to be a Yankee. But because of the awesome seasons he had there, that team was able to stay there. And the Haas family bought it. And Otherwise that team would have probably moved to Colorado and been the Denver Athletics.
When you bring that up and you mention that again, that proves that your dad just wanted to win. It didn't matter how. It could have been Reggie hitting the ball over the fence, or it could have been Rickey Henderson. I think Rickey Henderson goes a long way in giving your dad all kinds of kudos and credit for his career, correct?
Oh, absolutely. When Rickey won the stolen base title, he credited 3 people as having the most influence on his career. And it's kind of sad that night. Sports Illustrated kind of did him wrong. They showed a picture of him holding up the base saying, "Today I'm the greatest."
Yeah.
And then they showed Nolan Ryan. It was also the same night Nolan Ryan pitched his 6th no-hitter. And Nolan, the diplomat that he was, said, oh, shucks, I didn't mean to spoil Rickey's parade. And it made Nolan look so good and kind of made Rickey look kind of bad, Ollie-ish, I want to say. If you really heard what Rickey was saying, he wasn't saying, "I'm the greatest." What he was saying, he was talking to his mother in that statement, because what he'd said, the 3 most influential people in his life were my father, his mother, and his high school football coach. And he talked a little bit about why with each one, but he said, I grew up my whole life telling my mom, Lou Brock's the greatest. Lou Brock's the greatest player, Mom. He's the greatest. And that's who had the stolen base record. And that's who Rickey passed. And so he said, "Hey, Mom, today I'm the greatest." Yeah. He was talking to his mom. He wasn't saying, "I think I'm the greatest player ever." He was saying, "I was able to surpass my idol's accomplishment." Think how that makes me feel. And Rickey was awesome. He was a one-man gang. I don't know that I've watched very many players that could single-handedly just take over a game the way he did.
We mentioned Thurman's name a number of times, and that's number 1 on his list. Let's face it, he was the heart and soul of your dad's team that year. They knocked on the door in 76. They kicked it down in 77. 79, how tough was that? And do you have any personal memories of it? And how much of a toll did that take on your dad, Thurman?
I was with Dad when he found out.
Really?
We were fishing in New Jersey. It was an off day. They actually had a practice that day because the team wasn't playing good. And when that happened, Dad and Thurman were hanging out together. Dad was letting Thurman rest. Obviously, he's a catcher. It's a little bit of a demanding position. And one of the coaches was hitting me ground balls at second base. And Thurman looked at my father and said, "I can't wait to see me and my son the way I see you in Little Billy." And the next day, Dad and I are fishing, or that very evening, and we're not catching anything. And Dad's giving this guy a hard time about this place is terrible. All of a sudden, a police officer with a bullhorn, "Billy Martin, come to the dock. Billy Martin to the dock." And of course, Dad looks at me jokingly, "What'd I do now, pal?" We take the boat over to the dock, and there are 2 police cars there. And they asked Dad to get in one, and I'm to get in the other. And I help him load the boat up, and I jump in the other one, and I asked the police officer, "What's going on?" And he said, "Your father's about to get a phone call from Diane Munson and find out that Thurman died in a plane crash." He had bought a plane so that on off days he could go home and see his family and spend time with them, and was working on touch and go landings. And when the other guys got out and they weren't able to get Thurman out, which still flies on me a little bit. But I hung with Dad that night. We went back to his condo, and he cooked steaks for us. And he said, "Part, I've got to go out. I've got to go out." And I said, "Dad, you can't go out tonight. You know, what if something happens? I go the mood you're in, something could happen. You don't want to bastardize Thurman's memory." And he's like, "You're right, you're right." I made him a big, tall scotch and soda, and we watched about 3 John Wayne movies, and he just cried and cried, and he never even touched the drink. And I'd not ever seen him in that kind of pain. And it something I'll never forget, because Thurman was really good to me too. I mean, he would play pranks on me. If he was shagging balls in the outfield, I always had to watch and see where he was, because he had the ability of one-hopping a baseball and hitting me in the back of the knee, right in the knee pit, and would buckle me like I got hit by a truck. And I always had to watch out for him, but he was actually great to me. I used to shag balls with his catcher's mitt quite a bit, and now seeing Dad that night was a lesson, something I'll never forget.
And that emotional, thanks for sharing that with us, Bill. I know that's tough. And that emotional game that they had to play, I think it was against the Orioles with
Mercer.
Mercer had, my goodness, and with a heavy heart, no less.
Oh, he adored Thurman. I mean, everybody did. I mean, the 2 most respected players by their peers I ever witnessed were Thurman Munson and Don Mattingly. And Thurman was a guy that they all felt like they looked up to.
You says you were interviewed elsewhere, and I found this interesting. And the question to you was, what a moment that he was most proud of? And it was a moment that I don't think, most Yankee fans would think. When they asked you that question, I thought the answer would be catching that windblown pop-up to win the World Series in '52, or the MVP in '53. But it wasn't that, or '77, bringing the Yankees back after deep decline. It wasn't any of those. Billy, tell us, share with us.
Yeah, I like you, I absolutely thought it would be '53. And Mickey Mantle told me another story we'll have to save for a later date, but because he had another hit in that series that he didn't receive, but otherwise he would have set an all-time record for that World Series. But no, his favorite day was it 78 or 79 Old Timers game, when they announced that he would be coming back as Yankee manager. And Bob Shepard announced Dad, and now playing second base for Yankees, and next year's manager, Billy Martin. And the crowd went nuts, and it was an all-time standing ovation in Yankee history. He actually would have gotten it on Mickey Mantle Day, but the announcer stopped the standing ovation. So I think Dad got lucky on that deal. But that meant so much to him. It brought a tear to his eye as he was tipping his hat, because it wasn't just being with his players. He was with his former teammates. He was there with Mickey and Whitey and Casey Stengel and Joe D. I mean, Yogi was there. It was all of his Yankee people in the same building together, and it meant so much to him. And that's kind of neat.
Tell me about this one again, and then we'll wind it down. But speaking about your dad and how he was like playing chess when everybody else was playing checkers. I think about the Pine Tar game, and he knew that Brett had an illegal bat, but he waited and he waited for an opportune moment. Oh my God. I mean, do you recall what your dad, did he have any conversations with you about the Pine Tar game and everything like that?
Oh,
Because
sure.
talk about one for the ages.
Well, he would actually pull out the rule book every now and then and look for stuff. And he found the pine tar thing. He and Nettles were talking about it one day. And so they started really paying attention to who on every team had pine tar beyond the width of home plate. And so they knew which 2 or 3 guys on every team had it. Then they wanted to wait for that opportune moment. And obviously that game was a big game. And, Nettles hit a home run, I think, 8th inning, to put them ahead. They'd had him, I believe it was from the past season, they really come up with it. And, it was awesome. I mean, I love watching that video because Dad really liked George, off the field. And George had lots of friends on the Yankees. And had you ever seen anybody so angry in your life when he blew up there?
But again, that speaks to your dad, just as he looking at the rule book, looking for, and again, that's a competitive edge. That's a legal edge. That's outthinking the next guy. And then on top of that, he had such an inherent understanding about the game. He had an inherent understanding about people. And you mentioned analytics before. You're not going to find this on a computer page anywhere. He understood intimidation. He did not want to be intimidated. And if he had the opportunity to intimidate to his advantage to win, he was going to do it. He pulled any tool out of the shed to get it done. He was fearless. And again, this is why Yankee fans loved him so much. And as the years went on, you know what, Bill? To be honest with you, it just felt like to me that the losses were creating more of a weight on him, etc. And the off the field stuff, we all felt bad for. And it's something that for you as the son, it had to be so difficult because it's just you feel kind of helpless a little bit, where you'd like to maybe rein him in a little bit or do something, but that was not in the cards with your dad.
No, he was true to who he was. And sometimes it was, not what was best for his career. But like his friend Frank Sinatra, he was going to do it his way. And
he did.
He sure did.
And he did. You know what? We were talking about Italians before, but Tony LaRussa, another Italian, another great manager, Hall of Fame man, one of the greatest managers of all time.
Absolutely.
He gave your dad the best compliment. He said there was no better manager ever between the lines than Billy Martin. And what he's saying between the lines, because what he's basically acknowledging what you and I are talking about. That sometimes your dad was his own worst enemy. Enemy in terms of never back down, would never, whatever. But once the game started, between the lines, no greater tactician, no better manager. Me as a Yankee fan, when I had him in the dugout, I'm good. And I mean, I don't think anybody could give a better compliment than LaRussa, of all people, when he said that. I'm sure you've read that quote, right?
Oh, yes, sir. And they were such good friends.
Really?
I mean, Dad and Tony were very tight and would go out after games, facing off against each other, and they go out and would share things with each other and helped each other. They were both inducted into the Bay Area Hall of Fame together. Dad posthumously.
This is completely out of sequence and all of that, but you told a funny story where you went 5 for 5 as a player for your high school, playing a high school game. Your dad comes down to the field, and just finish off that story if you can. It
was the only game my father got to see me play in high school, and I had one of those red-ass coaches who screamed and yelled at us all the time, and I knew he wouldn't have the sack to do that with my father there. And so I relaxed, and I had a best game of my life. And uh, the funny part was my father always thought I was good because I played my best whenever he was there. I fed off his confidence, and he didn't care about that. I mean, he thought it was cool, don't get me wrong, but he sat with a bunch of my football player friends that I played football with also, and they told him that I'd gotten into a fight with the catcher on the other team a few weeks earlier in our parking lot. And I think he was more excited about that because that guy was a lot bigger than I was, and Dad realized maybe I had a little chip off the old block there, and he was hacking on the guy when he got up to bat. I hope you can hit better than you fight, boy. And I think he was trying to egg him on into taking another swing at me just so Dad could watch me fight too. But yeah, that was pretty neat. He was actually late to his own game versus the Texas Rangers that night to see me play my senior year.
Wow, that's an amazing story. And you know what? You're right. I mean, he did like an edge, a toughness to his players. You know, Al Leiter tells a funny story. It was his first full season with the Yankees. He was petrified of your dad, and he's a New Jersey guy, and he was great pitcher.
And Dad loved him.
Dad loved him, yeah. But he rode him a little bit because he was trying to toughen him up.
Absolutely,
so he was trying to toughen him up. And Art Fowler goes out to the mound and he goes, you got great stuff, but you're not throwing the ball over the plate. And he goes, I just know one thing. You are pissing off Billy.
Art would talk, he's from Spartanburg, South Carolina. He'd walk out there and say, "Whew, buddy, Billy is pissed off. I'm going to come out here and hang out with you for a little while because he's pissed in that dugout." And part of why he did that was just to loosen him up a little bit and take a little pressure off him in a way. And, but yeah, Art was the pitching coach / closer of the first team Dad managed, the 1968 Denver Bears. And he pretty much went with Dad wherever he went after that.
How cool was it with all the retired? Now there's a lot of retired numbers. Your dad, number one. What do you think of that? Did he ever talk about the number one? How cool it was to have that uniform number?
Oh, yeah, it meant so much to him to be put in that monument, to be there with those guys.
Yeah.
Because his Yankee pride, it's hard to explain. Maybe it's best, and I think one of his greatest quotes ever was, "I wasn't the greatest player in Yankee history, but I was the proudest."